Pac-Man World for the original PlayStation. Probably the most exciting platformer out there you've never heard of. Pac-Man is an absolute titan of the gaming industry who cemented his status as one of the pioneers of gaming with a single titular arcade title. This arcade title has you running around collecting dots while also trying to evade the grasp of a gang of mischievous ghosts. It's a pretty simple game that in hindsight kinda seems like the easiest possible get-rich-quick scheme for a mascot ever, because at the end of the day, I really don't think anybody's gonna be arguing that Pac-Man is a true icon of gaming. Nice job, Pac-Man. You became uber successful at something by making as little effort as possible. Way to fight the system. But yes, it's true. Pac-Man really has become a mainstay of the industry. He's found a level of success that's made it so he can virtually do no wrong. And with that comes the inevitability that he will shamelessly try to hop on popular trends whenever they pop up. And that mid to late 90s trend of trying to make a halfway decent 3D platformer ripped straight out of Super Mario 64? Yeah, let's just say Pac-Man was on that. And he went in on it hard when in 1999 he came out with Pac-Man World for the PS1. Pac-Man World tells the story of the titular Pac celebrating his 20th anniversary of being a thing, but he comes home one day to find that his 20th anniversary birthday bash has been trashed, and his entire family is gone, with them all having been kidnapped by none other than that pesky gaggle of ghosts, who also just so happen to be throwing their own party. A party that is also meant for Pac-Man, but their version of Pac-Man is a mystery villain who went out of his way to build this massive mecha suit of Pac, and now he's going around wearing it and impersonating the real Pac-Man? Yeah, this whole situation is kinda sketchy. You've got this unidentified character who is so obsessed with Pac-Man to the point where he is committing identity theft, kidnapping his entire family, and throwing this huge party to celebrate Pac-Man while dressed as him. You know what? I'm not gonna unpack that. Also, when Pac-Man comes home to find his whole family gone, he is just crushed by this, and for a brief moment, this game gets serious, as Pac-Man lets out a blood-curdling yell that is surprisingly epic. And so the adventure begins. Pac-Man sets out on a quest through 5 or 6 different worlds. Or is it 5? I don't know, might be 6, probably 5. And travels through various levels in each one in order to free his captured family, defeat all the ghost minions, and devour all the fruit and Pac Dots he can get. From here you pretty much know what the f*** going on. It's 3D platforming, and lots of it. It's Pac-Man's take on what was at the time a blossoming genre in the industry. And so the question needs to be asked. Does Pac-Man deliver in the 3D realm? Well, I mean, sure, it technically delivers a 3D platforming experience. I certainly can't take that away from it. All in all, I'd say the gameplay in Pac-Man World is most definitely what one might deem as mid. I don't know, it's honestly hard for me to come up with specific things to say about this game right now, so what I'll do is I'll just start from the beginning with Pac-Man's moveset. Pac-Man's got approximately 3 moves at his disposal, 3 whole-ass moves for you to play around with. 3! Wow, how generous the devs were to endow us with such a wide array of unique abilities. You've got the ability to make a mad dash up steep slopes or trigger the raising of platforms with the rev roll. You've got the always reliable butt bounce that uses Pac-Man's thick dump truck booty to reach higher ledges. And lastly, Pac-Man has the ability to go and get a f***ing gun and shoot Pac Dots back at enemies. Just kidding, he doesn't actually use a gun, you sillies. He more so just meekly throws them at the ground in front of him. Kinda like how that weird kid on the playground would when nobody else would hang out and eat pine cones with him. Yeah, I just had a hard time finding a whole heck of a lot of use for this move outside of a few special enemies that were a bit more of a challenge to take on. It's really all about the butt bounce when it comes to which move is the most useful, because I was using this thing constantly. It's obviously super useful when it comes to reaching higher up ledges, but it's also just the best all-around weapon to use on enemies. If you try to shoot Pac Dots at enemies, you're forced to get right up close and personal to make the shot. This in turn leaves you super vulnerable, right? Well, the butt bounce allows for you to get a hit on enemies from the comfort of the air, leaving some good distance between you and the enemy, so that way your chances of taking damage are minimized. The butt bounce is also just super fun to use in general. You could be doing things the boring, vanilla way and simply travel on foot from place to place, or you could be bouncing from room to room, making the melancholic in-between spaces where not a whole lot is happening that much more exciting. Speaking of movement, Pac-Man World actually feels pretty good in that regard, all things considered. Swimming in this game is both awful and terrible, just like any other 3D platformer of this era, but on foot, Pac-Man feels pretty smooth, and with the addition of the butt bounce, it honestly just feels very satisfying to control Pac-Man. It makes the rather vanilla nature of these levels more stimulating to progress through because of the simple ease of movement here. Great stuff. Unfortunately, due to the dated graphics, there are certain moments in Pac-Man World where depth perception ceases to exist, and it's usually during sections of the game where the level geometry has you moving straight forward rather than in the sideways direction. I'm not sure if this is because the camera is a little too low to the ground in these sections, or because the software is just literally incapable of generating adequate draw distance from this point of view. Or maybe it's because Pac-Man's fat ass keeps blocking up half the screen from this perspective, and I simply just can't see where I'm going half the time. Either way, it makes the straightforward perspective sections just awkward to get through at times, and makes it quite easy to misjudge certain jumps because of the lack of, well, perception of depth. Like, I literally cannot tell how far in front of me this platform is, dude. Like, what's up with that? As I mentioned, Pac-Man World's minute-to-minute gameplay is nothing to write home about, but there is a slight wrinkle added here that does promote quite a bit of charm towards the whole experience. This is a Pac-Man game after all, so it's only right that the devs implemented what are essentially pseudo-classic arcade-style Pac-Man minigames throughout its levels. There will be moments where you will activate a switch that causes a formation of Pac dots and ghosts to appear, and you have to grab a power pellet to get the ghosts off your back while you collect all the Pac dots for some extra points. It's kinda like you're getting a little break from the action with a cheap little mini version of the classic arcade game, and it absolutely makes sense that they would do it in this fashion. Pretty cute, right? It is Pac-Man after all, and it wouldn't be his game unless he was running around collecting power pellets and beating up ghosts. The only weird thing though is that there's no maze structure for you to carve a path through. It's just these wide open spaces where you have plenty of freedom to move. So, I mean, it's not like the ghosts can trap you in a corner or anything like that, or, it's not like they can actually be a threat to you in this kind of situation. They are pretty much pathetic in this instance, making the experience kind of hollow. But have no fear, because the nostalgic pandering does not stop there. Each level in Pac-Man World hosts a portal for you to unlock, and through these portals lies a literal, full-on classic arcade-style Pac-Man experience in 3D. These minigames are nearly identical to the arcade title, with the exception of a few extra obstacles thrown in to spice things up. I generally enjoy these minigames because while they give you a nice nostalgic break from the 3D platforming action, they also don't last overly long to the point where you get sick of them. The only conundrum here, though, is that there are a lot of these minigames, and many of them are stupidly similar to one another. So if you are going for 100% completion, there's definitely a chance that these will get really repetitive. But honestly, I think that repetitiveness is balanced out by the fact that, again, these minigames do not last any longer than 2 minutes each, which, by the way, is exactly how it should be. I also really appreciate the effort the devs made towards making Pac-Man World feel like a true Pac-Man experience, but just in 3D. These fanciful, cartoon-style graphics with lots of intense, deep color could not be any more perfect a vehicle to transition our favorite mascot to 3D. They had every opportunity in the world to completely change up Pac-Man's entire image with his first jump to 3D. They could have done away with all the Pac dots and power pellets and tried to make it this super realistic game where ghosts are actually terrifying to look at, and the whole story is this melodramatic epic about Pac-Man going out and saving his family like a badass, while also discovering this grander meaning to it all in the process. But nah, fam, they kept it simple. And even though my previous example of a more serious Pac-Man game is completely farcical in this situation, my point still stands. The devs smartly kept this game close to the concept, and it works. They gave us Pac-Man in a serviceable enough platformer with all the nostalgic bells and whistles you could think of, and they meshed those things together in a very cohesive fashion. Heck, they even went out of their way to include a port of the original Pac-Man arcade game just sitting in the main menu. It's just right there. It's right there for you to play, and you don't even have to do anything to unlock it. It's just there. As simple a move as this was, it speaks volumes in how much the devs cared about creating a definitive Pac-Man experience. And it's little additions like this that make me like Pac-Man World that much more. Because I know I'm getting the best of both worlds here, and even though the platforming aspect of the game leaves a lot to be desired, it's still more polished than a lot of the 3D clones that were out there at the time. I might even go as far as to say that it's better than Croc in some ways. Okay, I can't say that with a straight face. Of course it is. My main point in all this is that Pac-Man World doesn't have to be the most innovative quality platformer in the world, because the total package of the game, The cute, cartoony graphics, the passable controls, the moves, the minigames, the classic Pac-Man arcade port in the main menu, and yes, even the halfway decent platforming sections. It all adds up to a very solid net positive for me. Not to mention that Pac-Man World is definitely one of the more accessible games to 100% complete. You basically just gotta beat the main game, collect all the letters in each level that spell Pac-Man, which are not hard to find at all, complete all the maze minigames in each level, and complete the marathon mode in the main menu. And that's it. At least, I think. I don't know, after checking the forums it seems like a lot of people are confused about how to 100% this game. Yeah, these guys from 2004 seem totally confused too. I'm just gonna assume that I'm right. Thanks but no thanks, boomers. Pac-Man World overall was quite the confusing experience, to be honest. I've gone on and on about how uninteresting the gameplay can be, and I've even acknowledged how unoriginal the game is when compared to other platformers. I mean, at a glance, there's just nothing special about Pac-Man World. Nothing that screams A-list title, nothing that actively stops you from putting down the controller and playing something else. All these points still stand in my eyes, don't get me wrong. But in spite of it all, I've managed somehow to take a strong liking to Pac-Man World that goes beyond just gameplay. I think a lot of it has to do with the amount of heart that went into implementing all the elements that make this a Pac-Man game. The devs really cared about the fanbase here, and I respect the hell out of them for staying true to what Pac-Man is and what he represents. And what exactly does Pac-Man represent, you might ask? Well, it's different from person to person. Pac-Man to me represents a simpler time when games were all about just having a blast and not trying to impress game reviewers with flashy graphics or a deep story. He represents good vibes, he represents just chilling out and having a good time. Just like all those kids back in 1980 did when the original Pac-Man game blew up in arcades. I think Pac-Man World expertly captures that same vibe, but just on a considerably more advanced evolution of the craft. I mean, this whole experience just puts you at ease, it relaxes you, and says, hey, you're here to enjoy Pac-Man, you're here to be free and just have fun. Don't worry about anything else. I think Pac-Man World is the perfect game to come back to if you ever just need a break from reality. Just need a space to go where you can let go of all the stresses in your life and just enjoy a video game without investing too much mental energy. And that to me is just beautiful, because it teaches a grander lesson about how sometimes it's not always about being the best game ever or getting the highest score from critics. Because at the end of the day, all that is just bullshit. Croc, the Legend of the Gabos, was frustrating as heck and extremely problematic with its camera and control system, but I still managed to find meaningful pleasure with this game despite all that. And because Pac-Man World was no different, it's made me realize just how pointless game reviews really are. I don't care anymore how innovative or revolutionary a game is. I don't necessarily care anymore about how great a game looks or how sleek its graphics are. All that matters to me at this point is, did I find a noteworthy connection with the title? And with Pac-Man World, well, I did.